Welcome to CapitolView, the weekly program on state government and politics and how it might just affect you. Joining me this week on CapitolView is Raymon Troncoso, reporter for Capital News Illinois. This is his debut appearance on CapitolView. So welcome, Raymond. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
And also a very old hand, but not the less the wiser, Kent Redfield, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at University of Illinois Springfield. Welcome back, Dr. Redfield.
Good to be here.
Great. The big news this week, as we head into Labor Day weekend, the kind of the lull before the proverbial storm, I think, as some folks might come to think of it in the electoral season. The House Republicans have now called on invoked a rule, and they want to investigate House Speaker Michael Madigan regarding allegations made about his interactions of people close to him with Com Edison, which has agreed to pay a $200 million fine and said we were paying bribes. House Madigan, the Speaker, has called this a political stunt. Is this a stunt, or is there more to it than that? Professor Redfield.
Well, it certainly generates headlines, and you could see that in the papers this morning, although interestingly enough, it was on about page 3 or 4 of the Tribune and in the front page of the Sun-Times and the Journal Register. But this is a provision that was written in for discipline of members, and that's, the House can discipline its members absent any kind of criminal proceedings. And so it is a, 3 members can initiate this, any 3 members, and then it is, there's no discretion involved. You have to at least appoint an investigative committee. Then it is a multi-stage process with due process built in. I mean, if we ran the whole process, it would look somewhat like the impeachment process, in that, we've got a committee that's doing investigations. It will issue a report. If they can find, a majority, which would be 4 of the 6 members, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, to say there's enough here to have essentially a trial on charges. Then you get a 12-member special committee on discipline that would hear the charges, with 2 members from the House, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, being the managers, and then the Speaker and whatever witnesses and attorneys he had defending themselves. You would have to get, again, a majority of that committee, 7 of the 12, to recommend discipline. And your options are reprimand, censure, expulsion, or yes, he did something wrong, but we don't think it merits a penalty. So that was what this would look like if we went all through that. We have to keep in mind that, the petition that was filed essentially lays out all of the allegations that were made by the U.S. Attorney in the deferred plea agreement. So, we've rehashed all of those different charges. We've also thrown in the RICO indictment. Minority Leader Durkin, who said that they would not interfere with the U.S. Attorney's case, even though this committee has subpoena power for witnesses and documents. It's not entirely clear who they would get to talk to them, or what documents they might be able to acquire. The U.S. Attorney's Office is not going to turn over the results of their subpoenas for documents to the House committee. The U.S. Attorney certainly would not want the people from ComEd repeating what they hope will be testimony in the future in a indictment and trial of the Speaker. And any of the people mentioned in the deferred plea agreement or the RICO suit, I assume they have legal counsel, and their counsel would be crazy to let them go, make a statement that then would become a matter of public record. So, could we get some people, being subpoenaed and taking the Fifth Amendment? I guess that's possible. But, this is good for the rest of this General Assembly. When we get a new General Assembly in January, if it's not resolved, we start all over again. So it makes political sense if you're trying to make headlines before the election. I'm not sure what it adds to the process. If the U.S. Attorney's Office had documents or testimony directly linking the speaker, they would have indicted him. And so, that may in fact happen, but they will not be anxious to have their case or potential case out there in the newspaper. So, it's headlines, whether it's anything else, we shall see.
Yeah. I mean, I think that your point about the U.S. Attorney Office has said it's okay. I think that might be forgiveness, stretching it just a bit. We haven't talked to the U.S. Attorney's Office. I think Leader Durkin said we've consulted with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the implication was they didn't say no, hold back, we've got more here. The implication was that you can go on and do this sort of thing. And I think that maybe what you've said about the Fifth Amendment, yeah, if there's, I think the gold, maybe what the Republicans want more than anything is to get Mike Madigan taking the Fifth Amendment. That's electoral gold, which is what he or anybody else in his position would do if called to testify, I think, under oath while under criminal investigation. That's just a matter whether you're guilty or innocent. That's what you do. But there's a timeline here. In terms of the election, that's one thing. They've made some political hay, but in terms of making real progress, the clock is ticking. Is what it appears like. With that in mind, Professor, the General Assembly, this has not been an unused process in the past. There have been at least 2 instances in recent past where this has been used, correct?
Yeah, it's certainly, yes, it's 2 representatives that were indicted and were expelled, or one was, the process was going on when the representative resigned. It's more designed to deal with, let's say, the Lou Lang case where you had allegations of sexual harassment, or you've got, something where you haven't had a major U.S. attorney's investigation. The House of Representatives does not have trained, they don't have the FBI to go out and generate, evidence and things. So it's not particularly well suited for this. And frankly, other than expelling the speaker, you really couldn't, remove the speaker as speaker through this process. So I don't know that it's going to have any legs beyond just what you're getting out of the publicity. And again, the issuing of subpoenas, either for witnesses or documents, is at the sole discretion of the chairman, who is a Democrat. I think Christopher Welch is the chairman, and they would have to be signed off. Since the speaker has recused himself, Representative Harris would have to sign off in addition to the chairman. So I'm not holding my breath that they're going to issue a subpoena for the speaker to appear in front of a hearing before election day. I would be surprised if that would happen.
Well, I've got to say that when I received word of this yesterday, the first word came in a reaction from the speaker's office that was issued, and I can't recall, apologies, the name of the person and the email address that it came from, but it was from an official house, as we get these things. And within 15 minutes, I got a statement from Representative Welch from the exact same email address from the exact same person, which makes one sort of wonder about how might this play out. But I think you're right. It's been used before, and in 2 cases against Democratic lawmakers, one being Derek Smith, I believe,
Yes.
and another Louis Arroyo. Good for the goose, good for the gander. I mean,
And we should, I mean, the Senate, if you read the Senate rules, they really don't have a procedure in their rules to deal with discipline. And so, I think, the House tried to get some procedures in place after all of the problems they had with both sexual harassment and then the issue with whether or not the Speaker's former chief of staff had exceeded his, abused his power and that. But again, and this does not minimize, this has nothing to do with whether ultimately the Speaker would be indicted, which is clearly what the U.S. Attorney's Office, what their goal is. I mean, so we're not trying to minimize the seriousness of the allegations that are out there against the Speaker, but I don't think they're going to get resolved through this process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a good guess. On the other hand, there's resolution on a legalistic sense. I mean, and as you point out, ultimately this path could lead, I mean, not immediately, at least in theory, to expulsion. Again, not likely to happen, but there's also the political aspect of this. Why now? Because these allegations from the U.S. Attorney's Office came out some time ago. This process has been used against, as we've noted, 2 Democratic lawmakers in the past who stood accused of criminal conduct. And the House chose to use this sort of a process. Am I suspicious here of wondering why we waited until just a few days before Labor Day instead of 4 weeks ago, when he might have had a chance to be a little more thorough and vet this up?
If I were cynical, I would say that if I were heading up the Republican Party or the House Republican Party in Illinois, I have no money. I've got Donald Trump at the top of the ticket. It is not going well in Illinois, and this is something that is, this was the cost of printing a petition in terms of getting a lot of focus on the problems of the Democratic Party and the House Speaker. So I'm certainly, you have to think that this is something that they believe helps them politically when they're in a situation that they certainly are not strong going into the election in Illinois. That's just the reality of Illinois politics in 2020.
Oh, sure. I think. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Raymond.
Yeah, I believe Madigan essentially said the same thing in official correspondence from his office. I thought it was actually noteworthy that when the Black Caucus came out with their agenda, Madigan's release on that identified him as the chairperson of the Democratic Party in Illinois and not as the Speaker. But when he responded to these allegations against him and the special committee, he identified himself as the Speaker and released a very blatantly political statement from his official office in those communications, where he said this is a political stunt because Republicans don't have a message going into Election Day. And I think he wants to tie it to it being politics rather than he did anything wrong.
No, I think that's an excellent point, and I had noticed that in the Speaker's release yesterday. It was, you say, blatantly political. I think that's perhaps being overly kind. It was thoroughly political, I thought. I mean, naming, I believe it named Trump by name. And how do you, with a straight face, put out, because you're not supposed to be using public resources for political purposes. Was that Madigan's way of saying, neener, 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 catch me if you can?
I think so. He's already kind of establishing the base that this isn't a legitimate process because, like the professor said, this isn't a legal process. It is a political one, much like impeachment, where you don't really have to establish wrongdoing. You just need a majority vote that the people on the committee think you did something wrong or you violated some moral standard.
Yeah. And I, rightly or wrongly, on some level, I kind of hearken back to the summer of I'm dating myself here, of 1973-ish. And when soap operas were canceled to carry these committee hearings into an investigation of wrongdoing in the Watergate stuff. And at that point in time, it was partisan, but not as overtly as it is here. I mean, the Republicans, I think, can say, look, you've got a $200 million guilty plea here. You don't pay $200 million for nothing. It certainly, I guess, is, if nothing else, a bit embarrassing. I wonder also, are they going after Madigan? Or are they going after Pritzker? Because Madigan can control the General Assembly to some degree. Pritzker's an observer. I mean, what do we think about his reaction to this so far? Because he has said, if the speaker's done something wrong, he needs to talk about it. We need to know more. Well, here's the opportunity to know more. And the response from the governor so far has not been a ringing endorsement, nor has it been condemnation. What kind of a tightrope is he walking?
Oh, I think it's exactly that, a tightrope. I mean, the governor is an attorney, and he understands what it is to be in legal jeopardy, and the speaker clearly is in legal jeopardy. But this gets resolved through the courts. They either indict him or they don't. If he's indicted, he gets convicted. If he is, or he doesn't. If he gets convicted, he is no longer a member of the General Assembly and no longer Speaker of the House, because you can't hold public office if you've been convicted of a felony. So, the timing of the legal process doesn't fit the timing of the political process. And anything you can do to dirty up the Democrats, to dirty up the governor, feeds into the anti-graduated income tax narrative, which is, sure, they're just going to raise taxes on the rich people this time around, but can you really trust these guys? And so, so this is helpful in terms of the opposition to the graduated income tax. It dirties up the governor. It feeds into the narrative that Illinois politicians are corrupt. You can't trust them. And, all of a sudden it's, we're talking about a blank check, which the legislature has always had a blank check. There's no way for citizens to repeal a property tax or to approve a property tax. That's a piece of legislation. And there's no citizen initiative in Illinois.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right, and that anytime you can try to get a sitting governor onto the ballot, even though they're not really on the ballot, it can be something of a win for you, especially in the circumstances which we've gotten here. One thing that I wonder about, moving just slightly ahead here, is how much of an issue coronavirus is going to be heading into the fall campaigns. It's certainly morphed into a different issue, I think, than it was back in March when we were first confronted with this, and politics are coming about more. There's been an incident, Metro East now. The Metro East area has been hit by, due to rising numbers in terms of positive tests and other indicators. Some sanctions have been knocked down there. How's the governor doing on that? And has he recovered? Because I think recently there was, he had been giving uneven measures had been meted out between the Metro East and counties farther north in terms of response to adverse indicators in the COVID battle. Raymon, how's he doing on this, and how do you think COVID might play into the fall campaigns, if at all?
Well, I certainly think COVID is the biggest issue on everyone's mind, just because of how ubiquitous it is in every facet of life. It's affecting the economy, it's affecting people's jobs, it's affecting rent, it's affecting healthcare. So I think it's going to be a big issue. I don't know how exactly it's going to play into the narratives of each party, but it's certainly going to be an issue. In regards to the Metro East area, basically the state has broken down the counties into these sort of 11 regions that they monitor their positivity rate, and Metro East is region 7. And 2 weeks ago, because of a high positivity rate, one of the first to hit this kind of high positivity rate, they hit a certain benchmark where restrictions were put in place. But then those restrictions that were imposed were less severe than other regions got when they hit that same benchmark later on. Those restrictions were put in place for 2 weeks. And about a week ago, when he announced those harsher restrictions on the northern regions, Governor Pritzker came out and said, that was a mistake. We should have had equal treatment for all the regions. And after those previous restrictions he put on the Metro East area expired this Tuesday, he put in more harsh restrictions in line with what he has already put in place in the northern regions. And that includes, there's no indoor service for restaurants or bars. Social gatherings have to be limited to 25 guests or 1/4 room's capacity. In terms of how he's doing, there was a little bit of a snafu at the Department of Public Health, where the testing rates of the past few days have been significantly lower. In the past month, I think the average is about like 45,000 tests per day. And that was brought down significantly from nearly 50,000 because the past few days, they've done less than half that, around like 22,000 tests, 23,000 tests. And it was apparently due to an error where they had too much data and they have a significant backlog. They said that didn't prevent people from receiving results, but it just impacted their ability to report the results.
Okay. How much does it help or hinder? I mean, I think some folks might say, you know what, it's refreshing to hear, any kind of politician say I made a mistake with regard to reactions made in response to adverse indicators. Does that hurt him at all? And is that something that's going to stick? I know the Republicans at one point had been indicating that, well, you see, he's under the influence of legislators who want an easier road to hoe, so to speak, economically for their particular districts. Is that something that's going to stick here, or is by the time voting starts? And we're about on the cusp. I mean, we're just 3 weeks from when the election really goes. That could be an eternity. Is this a blip, or is this something that can stick?
Oh, I think it's how the governor has handled the virus is going to be an issue. It'll reflect down into people's perceptions of Democrats and Republicans. But the president and his opponent, former Vice President Biden, are the ones that are on the ballot. This reinforces the base. It tends to be the people that were the least supportive of the COVID restrictions tend to be more, southern Illinois, southeastern Illinois. It reinforces the base. The governor standing up to the president, helps in terms of the Chicago and the suburbs. And so, it will be a factor, but it's mostly in terms of the base. And, when you're an Illinois Republican and you have a base vote election, you don't do too well. You've got to be able to make grounds with swing voters and Democrats. And I don't think the Republicans are going to make any ground in terms of, how the COVID situation is in Illinois.
Yeah. And we, again, as many folks have often noted, and rightly so, nobody knows what the future can bring from an epidemiological standpoint. That said, in the past few months, I mean, we're nowhere near where we were last spring when this first broke out. I don't think that the folks, I think, are not as perhaps as worried as they once were. And so I wonder how economic factors, because we know, it's the big story in town is the presidential race. and the president certainly is going to be running on well, he's made it clear law and order, but beyond that, he can point to the stock market, which has made pretty much a full recovery and is leading, the world in a lot of respects, and say, do you want to go back to the days of a languishing economy, or pick me? How a long-winded way of saying, bringing it back to, does that in any way affect the fair tax? Are there coattails to that argument that might play out, at least on a statewide level? And we're down to less than a minute. Who's got a quick answer?
Oh, the virus will still be here. People will still be out of work. Yeah, if you got a lot of money invested in the stock market, you're in pretty good shape. But that's not a majority of the electorate, and so it's not going to play well. Unless the situation changes dramatically, it's not going to have an impact on what's going to be a pretty good Democratic year in Illinois.
Fair enough. Okay, and with that, we are out of time. And thanks everybody for joining us. And thanks both of my guests. I very much appreciate your thoughts. And we'll see you again next week on Capitol View.